y'all, Dixie here. Now let's talk about water and the treatment of it. If I had to throw out a number, I would guess that you pass at least one water source every 5 miles or so. This was true for me up until Pennsylvania, and I think somewhere in Pennsylvania I had a 10-mile water carry. It wasn't a necessity to carry it for 10 miles, but there was a water source in that 10 miles that was just under the safe level of heavy metals to drink. So I was like, you know, just in case we had a little influx this day, I'm gonna just carry my water and go past that water source. In New York, there were some dry-ish areas. I'm sure that that will vary every year. Some years will be much wetter or drier than others. But for the most part, you will not have to stress about water on the Appalachian Trail. And if there's a reason that you need to worry about it, people will be talking about it on trail. You'll see it in the shelter logbooks. And also, if you've got an app like Far Out, previously known as Gut Hook, then you can check the water sources ahead and people will be commenting on those frequently. So how much water should a hiker carry? This is one of those questions that really stressed me out because I didn't want to be without, but obviously I didn't want to carry too much because water is heavy. 1 liter of water weighs 2.2 pounds or 1 kilogram. I had the ability, the capacity to carry 2 to 4 liters of water at any given time, mainly because I like to gather up a lot when I'm at camp so I don't have to keep returning to the water source. But if I hit a dry spell, then I knew I would have the ability to carry more. But honestly, I never carried more than 2 liters, and that 2 liters was probably the first day I started the trail because I didn't know any better, and then in that 10-mile carry that I talked about later on in Pennsylvania. But for the majority of the trail, I never carried more than about a liter with me at a time. Each person is different, and from what I've observed on trail, it seems the fellas tend to drink more water than the ladies. On the AT, I would say I drank probably 1 liter per every 4 miles or so. At the beginning, it might have been more than that, but after a while it kind of evened out, and I got better at drinking water when I was taking breaks at a water source, kind of cameling up and making sure to hydrate while I was taking a break. So while I was hiking, I probably drank a little bit less. You will definitely figure out what works for you, but at no point will you have to carry all of the water that you need to drink in a day. I've had people ask me, is treating water on the AT really necessary? And I guess my best answer is, well, how much do you want to risk having diarrhea? Because even though a water source might look reasonable, it's flowing, and I don't see any animals actively crapping in it, most of the little things in the water that will cause you to be sick you can't see with your naked eye. Now, with all of that said, there are definitely people who thru-hike the AT every year and don't filter water at any point, and they may never have any troubles. And then on the flip side, there are people who might drink from a water source without treating it one time and end up with giardia because it was contaminated with fecal matter from an animal infected with giardia. I only drank untreated water on the Appalachian Trail one time, and it's just because I had to. I wanted to try it, and it was coming from a spring directly out of the ground right near a rock. Now, that doesn't mean that it was 100% safe and that there were no chances of contaminants, but I did some risk assessment and it seemed like a pretty low risk. But later on the trail in Virginia, I ended up with food poisoning, and it was coming out of me while I was trying to hike. So even though that wasn't related to drinking bad water, I decided that I'd never wanted to risk having diarrhea on trail again. Plus, treating water can be so simple, some simpler than others. The main things that you'll see hikers doing while thru-hiking the AT are filtering, chemical treatment, UV lights, and boiling. Filtration is definitely the most common way to treat water along the Appalachian Trail. There are several different types of filters. You might see a pump, a gravity system, or a system that you actually squeeze and force the water through the filter. All of these work by filtering the dirty water through a fine porous material, and it removes the bacteria and protozoa. Also, water filters don't remove viruses, but that's really not something that you have to worry about on the Appalachian Trail. That would be a bigger concern if you were going overseas somewhere. I started with a Sawyer squeeze. They only weigh about 3 ounces. I got a little annoyed with the dirty water bladder that it came with because it eventually busted, and then the Sawyer squeezes tell you not to over tighten, but unfortunately I didn't listen and I did over tighten, so the seal was falling out of my Sawyer, and instead of replacing the dirty bag, because you can do that, and the seal, I just opted for a different system. I had seen other people using a gravity filtration system, so I got the Platypus Gravity Works, and it was way more expensive and heavy. What I didn't realize at the time is you can actually set up a Sawyer squeeze to function as a gravity filter. But I used the gravity filter for a while. I liked it because it was nice. I didn't have to do all that squeezing that I did with the Sawyer squeeze, and gravity did the work for me. And for a larger group of people, having a gravity filter, I think, is worth the wait. Just being able to collect a large amount in a large bladder of water and have it do the work, especially if you've got children that you'll have to squeeze the water for if you were to have a Sawyer squeeze. As far as pumps go, unless that's the system you already have and you don't want to spend money on something new, then I would just avoid those. They just seem to be unnecessarily heavy, and I've never been tempted to try a pump. I eventually went back to the Sawyer squeeze after the AT, but if I was to start the AT tomorrow, then I would take a Sawyer squeeze again. But instead of using the bladders that the Sawyer squeezes come with, I have kind of modified the way I do things. I like to use a water bottle to collect dirty water, and I screw my Sawyer squeeze on top and just drink through the Sawyer squeeze. So no more sitting there monotonous squeezing into a clean bottle when I can just drink through it and do my filtration while I'm drinking. In addition to removing the bacteria and protozoa, I like that filters remove the grit and dirt from the water, so you're not getting all that extra stuff when you're drinking. There's no chemical aftertaste, and the filters will last a long time as long as you make sure to put them in your sleeping bag with you if it's going to be cold at night, because they will freeze and it can bust and ruin the filter. The downside of water filters are they do take some maintenance. You have to back flush them every so often so they don't get clogged up. The Sawyer squeeze comes with a syringe to back flush, but with my water bottle system, the way that I do things, I always have a sports cap with me, so I can get clean water while I'm in town, screw on my sports cap, and then attach it to where the water comes out of the filter and squeeze, and it'll flush all that dirt out. As I mentioned, it can take some time to filter if you've got a squeeze system, but I just bypass that by drinking through the filter. And filters can be bulkier if you go with a gravity feed or a pump option, but again, that's why I'm a fan of the Sawyer squeeze, because it's about that big and it's very lightweight at only about 3 ounces. The second most common water treatment on the Appalachian Trail is chemical treatment, and this can be drops like Aqua Mira or even bleach, like your regular unscented household bleach. The nice thing about chemical treatment is it's compact. You've got just a little bottle. If you use Aqua Mira, you might have 2 little bottles, and then whatever you decide to keep your bleach in if you were to go the bleach route. Different chemicals require different amounts to treat your water, but if you purchase an Aqua Mira or some other brand, then it will tell you the instructions. With bleach, it said that you need about 2 drops per liter of water. That's the rule of thumb. Of course, if the water is significantly cold or if it's significantly more dirty than normal, then you might up that a little bit. Also, chemical treatment kills bacteria, protozoa, and viruses. The downside to chemical treatment is it doesn't remove the grit. So if you get to a water source that's really shallow and you're kind of stirring it up while you're collecting, you're still going to have all of that grit. You could run some of it through a bandana, but that's just an extra step, whereas it's nice with a filter, it just takes it out. Also, a lot of chemical treatments leave a funky aftertaste. I know I tried using bleach for a little while on a different hike, and just smelling the bleach when I went to drink messed me up mentally. I couldn't handle it. But for some of y'all, that might not be a deal breaker, and this might be your preferred route. And with chemical treatments, you often have to wait at least 30 minutes for them to work their magic and go in there and kill all the bad guys before you can drink it. So if you're really thirsty and you're out of water and you get to a water source, then you still have to wait. Whereas other treatment methods, you can drink the water pretty much immediately. UV light is also sometimes used to treat water. I think I saw one or maybe two people using a UV light wand. Some of the pros of using UV light to treat your water is, one, it kills bacteria, protozoa, and viruses, and they're relatively easy to use and they seem to work well, although apparently they don't work quite as well with cloudy water. But on the AT, most of your water is pretty clear and nicely flowing. The cons of using something like a UV light wand are they don't take the grit out of water. They are on the heavier side of things, and depending on what you get, the more expensive side. And also they only filter one bottle at a time, so it would probably be more time consuming than, say, filtration. They require batteries, and I don't know if they make rechargeable ones, but it's just something that you're going to have to power. So if you for some reason don't have that power, then you can't treat your water. And finally, boiling. Boiling is said to be the most effective way to be sure that you're killing anything in your water that can harm you. The rule of thumb is to boil dirty water for at least 5 minutes. That's a rolling boil for 5 minutes. This is always good to have as a backup method in case any of your other stuff fails. You can at least boil it. But as far as using this as your primary source of treating water, it can be very time consuming, and also it uses a lot of fuel if you're using a canister fuel or alcohol stove, etc. I guess with the wood stove you wouldn't be so worried about fuel, but you've got to boil the water all of that time, then allow it to cool before you put it into whatever container you're drinking from. I actually didn't see anybody that used this as their primary means to treat water on trail, but my friend Perk did use a life straw during the day while he was hiking for water treatment, which is another form of filtration. And at night when he cooked dinner, he would just boil his water for at least 5 minutes before continuing the cooking process. Regardless of how you decide to treat your water, you're gonna have to have a way to tote it. When I was through hiking the AT, I had a platypus hydration pouch with a hydration tube and bite valve, and I would filter my water, put the clean water in that platypus bladder, and then I would put the bladder inside my pack, run the hose through the hydration port on my pack, and most packs do have a hydration port. And then I clipped the tube and bite valve to my shoulder strap, so whenever I wanted water, I would just reach down and sip on the hose. I like the hydration bladders because they are very convenient. You don't have to reach far to get to your water. It's just right there. But one of the downsides, in my opinion, of having a hydration bladder is you can't gauge exactly how much water you have at any given time. Now, I got pretty good at knowing how much I had drank, and when you've practiced for thousands of miles, you will kind of hone in on that skill. But after the AT, to save weight, I moved to a system where I just use smart water bottles with my Sawyer squeeze twisted onto the top. So I collect dirty water and just drink right through the filter. So it's one process. I don't have to squeeze or treat my water in any way and then pour it into a clean bladder. I do everything in a one-step process. Not only can I tell how much water I have now at any given time because I keep my water bottles in the cup holders on either side of my pack, so I can just lift it up and look at it. But also, I don't have to stop and take my pack off, deal with water treatment, fill up my bladder, close everything up, put my pack back on. Instead, I can literally scoop down at a stream that crosses the trail, collect water, and keep hiking. So it saves time and weight. Another thing about the hydration bladder that was kind of annoying is sometimes I would pack up my hydration bladder after filling it up and put on my pack, and then I'd realize there was a kink in my hose when I went to drink through the bite valve. So then I'd have to take my pack off and fix the hose so it wasn't kinked up so I could get some water. Now, if you just really like the bladder hydration system, I've seen people do an inline filtration with a Sawyer Squeeze Mini, where they cut their hydration tube and put the end of the tube that attaches to the bladder on the dirty side of the filter, and on the side where the clean water comes out, obviously the hose with the bite valve would connect to that side. So then while you're drinking through the tube, it's filtering the water for you. I worry about that a little bit just because if that tube was to kind of get wiggled off of there, it could be a disaster in your pack. But I don't know, I guess they squeeze on there pretty tightly, and I don't recall people complaining about that happening. You might get sick of drinking only water out on the trail, and plus it's good sometimes to add some electrolytes, especially when you're sweating all of them out. So you might want to think about carrying along some drink mixes. But I just wanted to point out that if you are going to do drink mixes, you want to have a separate clean water bottle for those drink mixes. You don't want to mix it with your dirty water and try to drink it through your filter. Or I also would not recommend mixing up the drink mixture in your hydration bladder if you're going to do the tube with the bite valve, because sticky things, sugars and whatnot can be kind of hard to clean out of those bladders. So I would just treat your water and pour it into a bottle that is for clean water purposes only, and do your drink mixtures in that. You don't want to use a bottle that's had dirty or untreated water in it, because even just a little bit of some of those bad guys in the water can make you sick, and it's just not worth it. Regardless of which method you use to treat your water, and especially if you decide not to treat your water, it's always good to be kind of choosy when selecting a water source. Looking for a water source that's running and looks relatively clear is always better than something that's stagnant. Also, if you see a dead animal floating nearby, it might be a good idea to move on to the next one, or an animal using the bathroom in the water, etc. Now, if that is your only option and you're in an emergency situation, then of course you can always boil just to make sure that you've killed everything in the water and it's safe enough to drink. But likely none of that will be an issue for you. Water quality was always pretty good for me while I was out on the AT. All right, y'all, that is all I have for you today on this topic. Next up, we're gonna be talking about hygiene on trail. If you wanna check that out, you can click right here. Or if you wanna see all of this information in one big video that's split up by timestamps, then you can click right down here. Or if you want to watch my through hike of the Appalachian Trail, you can check that out below. Thank y'all so much for watching, and we will see y'all next time.